and hopefully we'll get enough people to show up here in the next couple of minutes. We are going to have a hearing today on House Bill 2321. Very quickly, for those of you who are watching online, you can go online to ks.gov, go to the committees tab. Once you get there, look for standing committees and select Senate. And then you have to go to the second page to get to utilities. You select the committee testimony, and there will be a little date box below that. You click on the date box, and all the testimony will be there and available for you. So, House Bill 2321, requiring electric public utilities to notify cities prior to construction of urban electric transmission lines. Do we have our revisor online? Mr. Sterling?
Yes.
All righty. If you'll go ahead and give us a bill overview, we'd appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2321 would require an electric utility to provide notification to a city and landowners prior to beginning construction of an urban electric transmission line that was within the boundaries of that city. So the bill would define an urban electric transmission line as a line that traversed at least 2.5 miles through the corporate limits of a city that having a population of 300,000 or more, and that is designed for the transfer of 69 kilovolts to 230 kilovolts of electricity. So prior to the construction of the line, the utility would be required to provide the city all preliminary construction plans and visual examples showing the proposed locations and dimensions of all poles and supporting facilities relative to the streets, easements, and public right-of-ways. The notice would be required to be provided to the city 6 months prior to the construction. Additionally, the bill would require that notice of the proposed construction of the line and have an open house, and that open house be provided to all landowners and tenants of record whose land was proposed to be acquired in connection with the construction of the line, or that is located within 660 feet of the easement for the line. The governing body of the city through which the line was proposed to traverse, and the KCC. The notice of that open house provided to those entities would be required to be published in a newspaper having general circulation in the city through which the line was proposed, and would need to include the time, place, and subject matter of the open house. In conducting the open house, the utility would be required to allow for public comment regarding the proposed construction, have a KCC commissioner and staff person in attendance, and hold the open house on a weekend day or after 5 p.m. during the week. Lastly, the provisions of the bill would not apply in situations where the construction or repair of the urban electric transmission line was necessary due to damage caused by any natural causes or other physical damage to the line. And I'd be happy to try to answer questions that the committee might have.
Mr. Sterling, committee, any questions for a revisor? Seeing none, we'll turn to our conferees providing oral testimony in favor of the bill. And first up would be Representative Gail Finney. Representative?
Can you hear me now? Okay. My name is Gail Finney, State Representative from the 84th District, and I'm glad to be here today. Today has been what I call a long journey on an issue that has impacted the 84th District in Northeast Wichita. In 2018, just to give you a little background history, in 2018, the summer through the fall, the Westar at the time, now Evergy, had placed over 50 105-foot poles in the community that I represent. If I could just pass these pictures around, is that okay? And the reason we're here today is because at the time, myself and a lot of the constituents in the district were unaware that these poles were being installed. Some people, landowners, knew, but they had no idea as to the extent and the size and the visual impact that these poles had in our community. And it stretches approximately 3.1 miles through a poor economic neighborhood. And so once we found out when they started going up, to be quite honest, myself and a lot of people in our neighborhood were extremely upset because we feel like this is going to be a devastating impact over generations because most of the poles are still there. However, since that time, there has been a couple bills introduced on this issue previously. And at the time, what I was trying to do is we just wanted to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again on a community, particularly not knowing exactly when it's going to happen, to the extent that it's going to happen. So our goal is to make sure that something like this doesn't happen. So myself and quite a few of the community members there, we started putting our heads together and trying to figure out a way, like, what can we do to stop this in the future? Because we didn't want the other communities to experience this. So originally we had came up with the idea of, trying to get the KCC to, do siting plans with Evergy and for it to go through their process so that they could at least evaluate it and, give it a second opinion basically before something like this happens. And that bill did not pass. And this version that we're working with today is House Bill 2321. And what this bill does, it's a negotiated version between myself, Evergy, and several of our community members. And so what we were trying to do is to be able to get the city of Wichita. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
No,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, okay. But what we're trying to do is to get the city of Wichita to be more active in the process. We'd like to be notified of what's going on, something major to this extent. We want to be able to know what's going on. And so in this negotiated version, I keep saying negotiated version because it's taken us 2.5 years to get to this point. It's kind of really hurtful. I mean, I shouldn't say hurtful, but this bill in this situation is still very impactful, particularly because I live only 4 or 5 blocks from where it is. And if I go out in my yard, I can see those poles daily, and they're not going away. So we want to make sure that we, get with the utility company and talk with them. What can we do to make sure that the city of Wichita is aware, that we know what the guidelines are going in? So what this bill does, it offers for them to be able to notify city of Wichita or city over 300,000 in advance, 6 months in advance. And it also gives the opportunity to make the community aware with notification. And by it going through the city of Wichita, it would probably go through what we call our Metropolitan Area Planning Committee, which they would also send out notifications to the community to let people know what's forthcoming. And then there would be an open house that would let people, particularly landowners and maybe tenants, get the opportunity to give comment and feedback back to the electric companies, particularly if there's something that we're dissatisfied with or something that we'd like to see changed. So, like I said, we've come a long way since 2018, but I'm very glad to say I support this bill today. And it's one of the lessons that I've learned is when you learn how to communicate better, if you could put your emotions aside, you could be able to use your head much more deliberately, and you could be able to come to negotiation that benefits everybody. So I'll stand with that, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to ask. And I might have forgot something because I didn't bring my testimony because I like to speak on this issue just off the cuff.
Do you have to be in committee elsewhere?
Not till 3:30.
Okay, then what we'll do is we'll have the rest of proponents testify, and then we'll open it up to questions for anybody
Okay.
who wants a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Senator Faust-Godot is running a little bit behind, so we're going to jump ahead to Brandon Johnson, who's the Vice Mayor of Wichita, and he is on, I believe, with us WebEx. Is that correct? Okay. Brandon, are you there? Brandon, are you able to hear us? Or we're not able to hear you if you're there. The mic might be muted. Tell you what we'll do, rather than wait on Brandon, and he can come back to us if he's chat. Okay, we'll see where we're at. Let's jump ahead then to Jeff Beasley, who's the Vice President of Customer Operations at Evergy. Jeff, you're pinch hitting. Well, you're just jumping ahead.
No. First of all, Mr. Chairman and the committee, my name is Jeff Beasley. I'm Vice President of Customer Operations with Evergy, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to offer some information about Evergy's transmission project in Northeast Wichita, and to make comments on House Bill 2321. You have my written testimony that describes a bit of the history as it relates to the project. We appreciate the proponents' willingness to work with us over the last few months to find common ground on a piece of legislation which we believe addresses the concerns of the community, the city of Wichita, and expands the opportunities for urban communities to offer input on transmission projects that sometimes occur in heavily populated areas in Kansas. And as we've witnessed in the last few weeks when we had the extreme weather, transmission reliability is a concern that is important to all of us. Many of you on this committee are aware of the project already, and so we won't go into the details of the matters about the project, other than to say that Evergy realizes the missteps it took when we rebuilt the existing transmission line in the Northeast Wichita neighborhood a few years ago. And since then, we've been working very intently, listening to the community, the neighborhood, the elected officials, and others concerned citizens to incorporate their feedback that has resulted in changes to our internal policies and processes. One of the most important lessons we learned that when replacing decade-old equipment is to ensure that the residents have a visual of what the new, larger, more modern, and more safe transmission infrastructure looks like. This bill addresses that. Any type of infrastructure improvement or installation is clearly disruptive to any neighborhood or any community. We've learned a lot from this rebuild, and we're making changes to the way that we communicate with neighborhoods before, during, and after projects. Construction standards have changed. The height of the wire that is on the pole, the size of the wire, the poles themselves, they are not what they were 50 and 60 years ago when this line was originally built. And so we need to do a better job, and we will do a better job of communicating to those in the neighborhood what those changes will look like. As I mentioned, we've already changed our process, and this process change is not only for new transmission lines, but it's for all rebuilds also, which was the example, the case in this transmission line. HB 2321 adds some certainty for residential neighborhoods and cities that they will have a voice in the process of transmission line rebuilds. In closing, I would just like to thank Representative Finney, Wichita City Councilman Johnson for their input and the willingness to collaborate. We're also very thankful and grateful for the patience and understanding of the residents in Wichita neighborhood where this transmission line is located. Their feedback has made a difference and has resulted in changes on how Evergy, you're lucky I didn't say KG&E, will approach communication in the future as we undertake projects that are necessary to provide reliable electricity. And as for the residents of this Northeast Wichita neighborhood, they can be assured that we will continue working together, listening to their concerns and doing what we can to be a good neighbor and be good partners for decades to come. Thank you, committee, for hearing this bill, and I'm pleased to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we'll see if our other proponent is online, then we'll open it up. Okay, so we do now have Brandon Johnson, Vice Mayor of Wichita, Kansas. Brandon?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
We've got you. Yes,
All
sir.
right, awesome. Sorry about that. This is a new device for me. I'm here in support of this legislation. Like Representative Finney said and Mr. Beasley, this was a negotiated legislation that I think can address the issues that the community had in a way that lets them know what was going on. At the heart of the issue, as Representative Finney had talked about, I received a lot of those phone calls that day from folks who were not happy. And it really stemmed around not knowing what was coming, the visual aesthetic look of it, and the new standards. And this legislation, having those plans 6 months in advance, will allow the opportunity for a city of 300,000, in this case, city of Wichita, to work through neighborhood engagement, whether that's our district advisory boards, which actually take place after 5 o'clock, our Metropolitan Area Planning Commission that meets actually weekly would be able to hold a public hearing, and having an open house with the KCC commissioner being there will allow the community's voice to be heard. Even though they can't say yes or no to something, they can let those who do have the ability to approve or not approve, let them know what they think about not only the design of it, the impact, and all of the above. And we'll be able to keep those in public meetings and submit that to the KCC. So that's more opportunity for folks to engage in this process. And Evergy has been willing to hear them out as well. So I think this legislation is a great step in the right direction. The notification pieces of this legislation also hit on one of the bigger issues we had. You know, we have some out-of-state property owners here in Wichita, and they were notified about this, but may not have told their tenant. So a lot of the tenants were caught off guard by this. This legislation fixes that. The folks who live in the house will know about it, whether they own it or they're renting. Those are great things. And again, even the 660-foot notification, that was an issue with some of the homeowners with Habitat for Humanity who were across the street who weren't notified. This legislation helps that. So this begins to check off a lot of the boxes around the issues that we had. Again, it was good to have Evergy come to the table and work with Representative Finney, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Beasley as much as we have. Probably bugged him more than anyone else. But we had some really good dialogue. I think this is a good step. I'm definitely supportive of it, and would stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Brandon. We appreciate it. We'll hold off on questions. So we have one more oral proponent showing up, and then we will open it up for questions to the committee. And I think if you're ready, Senator Faust-Godot, we've got the mic for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you so much, and thank you for waiting on me. I was testifying in another hearing just down the hall from you. I want to start off by saying...
Just make sure, identify yourself. I'm sorry, so everybody online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Olitha Faust-Godot, here testifying in favor of it. Is it House Bill 2321? I'm in favor of that bill, and I first wanted to say thank you so much to Representative Gail Finney for her hard work on this particular piece of legislation, and thank Evergy for working with Representative Finney and other constituents throughout the state of Kansas, especially in the city of Wichita, inner city Wichita, of where I reside, and Representative Finney, we don't live too far from each other, and the senator and representative from that area, and when the polls started going up, we started receiving the calls, and so I am just delighted that so many Wichitans were able to join in on the conversation, the compromises made with Evergy. Is that Mr. Beasley there? Hi. And so this is to me of how government really works. Working together with all entities, trying to make things good for Kansans. And so I'm sure Representative Finney and others have shared the concerns, and I echo those concerns. And I certainly ask for your strong support for this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll stand for any questions or answer any that you may have.
Thank you, Senator Faust-Godot. I think what we will do is, by the way, just call attention to the committee that we have some written proponent testimony from LaWanda DeShazer, the Community Advocate Group of Wichita, Dr. Glenda Overstreet Vaughn from the Political Action Chair of the NAACP, and Barbara Johnston, who's a private citizen. They've got their written testimony in your folders. So this time, I think what I'll do is open it up to any questions from the committee for any of our conferees, if there are any. Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First thing caught my eye here, I was wondering if somebody, it says at least 2.5 miles in length. Was there anything magical about why that was picked?
You know, there was some discussion about that in terms of what.
Just ID yourself again for the,
Sorry.
I know it's hard
Yes,
to
I know.
remember.
Jeff Beasley, Vice President, Customer Operations with Evergy. There was some discussion going back and forth in terms of that length and what really made sense in terms of, you know, we talked about 1 mile, we talked about even more than that. But in terms of a general number, you know, 1 mile seemed to be too short of a distance and some of the work being done. More than that seemed to be more of a project, if you will, and would warrant the administrative work.
Senator Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad to see resolution was achieved and a solution. I think that's important, so glad to see that. I was in House Utilities, I think, when there was a prior iteration of this that has then since been worked to where it is today. I do have a question. This comes to us from the House, as amended by the House. Strong support over in the House. I did see one Wichita representative voted no. Do you know what the opposition was to the bill?
There was actually two.
You have to identify yourself, sorry.
Representative Gail Finney from Wichita. There was actually two that voted against it.
Right, I just noticed one is from Wichita, and so I was
Yes.
wondering, since this is a Wichita,
He thought that it just wasn't strong enough. He liked
Wasn't strong
prior bill.
okay, there you go. Okay.
So both of them that voted against it thought that it was just not strong enough. Okay.
Okay. Well, again, I like that. That's part of when you are reaching solution, kind of both sides are unhappy. One side probably thinks it goes too far. The other side thinks it doesn't go far enough. But it's a resolution that was reached that the parties find it to be reasonable. And so thank you for the hard work that went into putting this together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Hawk first.
Thank you, and I think this is for Mr. Beasley, not sure, and it may be for the proponents. Could you explain to me again the 300,000 city size and what happened with that provision? I'm reading one thing that says that's not in there, and then I'm seeing unclearly if maybe that just applies to rural cooperatives.
Jeff Beasley, Evergy. No, the 300,000 is included in this bill, and it has to do, I mean, it is for, you know, it's geared for a larger metropolitan area, more urban setting, and that includes the city of Wichita.
Did Evergy give any thought to how we could have similar issues in smaller suburban environments? Yes. And what was Evergy's thinking about that?
Well, we admit that in this instance, we made a mistake in rebuilding the line and how we communicated with everybody. What we have done is in terms of for all projects, we have fortified our communication plan, our project plan. We'll follow the same steps, the same ones that we were doing in Wichita. This comes down to, in the Wichita community, they wanted to have a KCC representative in the meeting, and so that kind of said, instead of having a KCC representative in all locations for all these type of projects, which are several, it at least said that this is what we would do in the city of Wichita.
So my next logical follow-up, you don't have any plans for any big lines in Manhattan, do you? And if so, are we going to need to generate bills with smaller size, or is Evergy learned from this experience where this might not occur in some other places?
Well, the answer is most likely that we would be building in Manhattan and other cities. It is just, as we talked about, transmission lines are vital and reliability is vital to them. And the other thing is, too, it is not something we're proud of, the fact that we have to come in front of you and talk to you about having us change our processes for something that we made a mistake on. We don't want to be here talking about this again. So we will be doing all that we can to make sure that when we have a project, we are having the open house, we are reaching out to the neighborhoods, and that we are providing all the visual information that there's clearly no doubt in anybody's mind what it is that we're doing and how we're going to be doing it.
Chairman, may I? So I'm assuming from that, if you come to Manhattan or other areas, you'll have that same process.
We will.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a question probably for Brandon Johnson, if he's still online, and if not, I may ask either the senator or representative.
I am here, Senator.
Thank you so much. So I really appreciated the part of this bill that talks about the notification to the landowners and to the tenants of record. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm wondering how the city of Wichita keeps track of those tenants of record. Do you have rental registration, or how will you be able to provide that information to the electric utility for the notification?
Brandon Johnson, Vice Mayor of Wichita. I would love to have rental registration. We don't have that, but our Public Works and Utilities actually keeps land records, works with our county. The county has I use a GIS map, but they have a database of folks who reside and versus folks who have property. And we use that quite a bit with notifications through MAPC as far as land development goes. That's the same process we would use in this case.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that you do have that ability to provide that notification. And that may also be a thing that makes this bill appropriate and specific to Wichita, because there may be a situation in other communities that Evergy will have to rely on newspaper advertising if a community doesn't have such records. I would be happy if Evergy would also like to respond.
I would only share that between the city of Wichita and ourselves, using our customer database, we should be able to make sure we do notify all people in the area.
Senator
Jeff Beasley, Evergy.
Yeah, Evergy, I got a question. You know, we talked about maybe Manhattan, you might have to build these. Is that because of all the electric cars that are going to be charging that we're going to have to upsize? You know, if everybody has electric cars, will we have to upsize some of these lines? Probably.
You know, I don't think the electric cars are going to cause the reason why we need to redo the transmission lines. But we certainly hope so, you know.
Okay.
One more, and then we'll move on to our neutral. Yeah.
Sorry, I just have to respond to that. If you do need to build a line, I know a house that has a new electric car that may need one. So, thank you.
All righty. Is there any other oral proponent that would like to testify either online or in the room? Seeing none, we'll move on to our neutral testimony from Leo Hanos, Chief Engineer of Kansas Corporation Commission. Leo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Leo Hanos. I'm the Chief Engineer for the KCC Utilities Division, and I'm appearing before you on behalf of staff to take a neutral position on 2321. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what this bill does and doesn't do for regards what the KCC does for line siting. The bill looks at anything over 2.5 miles long and between 69 kV and 230 kV. Now, the KCC siting authority, which is found under 66-181,183, what it does is allows the KCC to provide siting over lines that are at least 230 kV and more than 5 miles in length. So for any line here that's less than 5 miles long, that's 230 kV and above, the KCC would not have any siting authority over that. So just keep that in mind if any short sections of that size voltage is brought into play. A KCC siting meeting, I've been to 2 or 3 of them, and generally it's almost the same process that you're seeing described here in this bill. We have a meeting with the public and the utility that's there that's proposing this. There is some back and forth to adjust the route if it needs to be. if the commission feels it's right, we're more like a negotiator almost there. We more or less mediate the, any kind of concerns that the customers would have. I would also say that we hear from Evergy quite often, anytime there's some building going on in cities. We have a quarterly meeting with them where they brief us on what they got planned. I know that they negotiated very well in the city of Harrington for a small section of transmission line they put in there. It was a great process. Everyone got what they needed out of it. So it does work even without legislation. So I would see that Evergy does their job as far as taking care of this. I mean, they do that already, and this will formalize it. Having the commission involved, that's a great thing. We try to make as many meetings as we can. I will say that 6 o'clock or an evening meetings, you're going to need all of 6 months to get that on their schedule sometimes. So we'll see how that works as we go forward. That's all I really have. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Committee, any questions? I do think it says at least 2.5 miles in length. So are you saying there's gray area between 2.5 and 5 miles, or this would probably fall under your?
Well, it does say at least 2.5 miles in length, but up to 230 kV.
Okay.
So our jurisdiction starts at 230, but only at 5 miles. So anything 230 and above that's less than 5 miles, we wouldn't have any kind of routing on that.
Do you think there's a necessity for an amendment to this, or do you think the spirit of this will do the trick?
I think this will work fine. I think it's going to be fine.
Okay. Senator Francisco?
Thank you. You referred to the scheduling of 6 months, just in terms of getting, because we only have 3 KCC commissioners, right? So one of those 3 would need to, attend the meeting. So the 6 months is that the utility can't begin site preparation for or construction of for 6 months. So what time is there between the meeting and?
I thought there was a notice provision. It may not be 6 months, but we'll have to work that out for their schedule. So I'm sure if these happen, the planning will have to come into play just to make sure that the logistics are there to get on everybody's schedule. 6 months, I think you're right, is actually they couldn't start before 6 months. The meeting doesn't have to be 6 months in preparation, but it's going to take some time to, I just saw that and I was keyed on the fact that it's going to take some time to get this set up for a commissioner to be there.
I think that's good for everyone to be aware of, since they're just talking about, publishing the notice a week in advance. So I'm glad that the vice mayor is here, and we'll also know that the city will want to be giving adequate notice about that meeting.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hanos. We have no other listed neutral testimony. Is there any in the room or online? Seeing none, are there any opponents either in the room or online? Seeing none, did you have a final question, Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a final question, but a final thank you, and that's to Representative Finney, who had contacted me when she was working on this before. There was certainly the hope that we would have a meeting, I think, last year before we adjourned, and I just want to thank her for, again, just tireless work on this and all the help you've given to the rest of us to understand the issues and concerns.
I think that wraps it up for today on House Bill 2321. We have no other business before us, so thank you, everyone. And with that, we are adjourned.